Oh, geez. Oh,
Hi, everyone. I am Alyssa Adams, and I'm the Director of Executive Coaching with Team Performance Institute. And I am here with Madeline.
hi, everybody. My name is Madeline Scipione. I'm an executive coach with Team Performance Institute.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We are going to talk about feedback. So, today we're going to share 3 steps to go from avoiding feedback to sharing clear, direct feedback. And we will do that speaking to the perspective of leaders. So, folks who are on the giving side of feedback will be kind of the focus of this talk. What makes it hard, some things you can do to face it more head on. And then maybe in a future video, we'll talk a little bit about how to receive feedback, which is a whole other topic we can get into. So, Madeline, let's kick off with talking a little bit about what is feedback? How do we define that? And then why do people avoid it?
Such a good question. So I think feedback to me is, and I love I think words matter, right? So we always start out when we're talking about, well, what does that mean to you? How do you define that, right? So when we talk about feedback to me is somebody telling me or like seeing me saying, hey, you're here to do a skill, but I need you. These are your strengths and these are your weaknesses. That's how I would define feedback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think just to extend what you've already said, it's just any time you're giving information or feedback, right, on your performance, on what you're doing well, not doing so well, any just thoughts that people might have. It doesn't even have to be a formal setting, right? Just, hey, can you do this a little bit differently? Or, hey, it's hard for me to understand when you do this one thing. Or that question was a little unclear. Can you rephrase it? I think all of those can be moments of feedback. But what we'll talk about today too is just a little bit more in terms of like structured feedback when you're kind of in a meeting and you're giving somebody a little more direct feedback. And walk us through why people might want to avoid that or what makes people shy away from doing that comfortably.
Well, I think especially in an executive to employee kind of setting, I think there is a relationship, right? They get to know each other, right? You're in this working environment and you're getting to really know them both professionally and personally. You know a little bit about their background, their family, all the things, right? So then the conversation becomes difficult because at times people don't want to be insensitive, hurtful, or reluctant to give feedback because they're not sure how the other person is going to take it because themselves actually need to recognize like what is it about giving the feedback makes them feel uncomfortable. So from that leadership perspective, really, I would say honing in on what it is that makes it uncomfortable for the person giving the feedback.
Yeah. So what I hear in there is really step one. The first step, right, is what is it that makes it hard for me, right? And what is it that I'm worried might happen? Or it's hard for me because fill in the blank to get into a conversation that you may anticipate as challenging. Any other thoughts you have on that? What's coming up for you?
I think too, to add on to that is being reflective. Where have you had a challenging time giving feedback or even having a hard conversation to your point of like saying, I need to speak up and tell this person like, hey, can you pivot? Or I'd like to see it be a little bit different this way. Or your work product, I like this, but these are the 3 things that I need to have it fixed. Even sometimes that can be a challenge for people because it comes down to the perception of, am I hurting somebody's feelings sometimes? Or am I being too aggressive? Or is this person going to pull away and retract because of the feedback I'm giving them?
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of thoughtfulness around how the other person may hear or experience the feedback,
Yeah.
which for some people may cause us to kind of freeze and not want to do it or to deliver it in such an unclear way that the person may not even know what it is that you're sharing or what the takeaways are.
And I think, Alyssa, you hit on that really clear is when we aren't clear in our messaging and giving the feedback, it can actually give mixed messages because we can be so like reluctant and really just being clear. So I think kind of if we went into step 2, if you were really wanting to ensure you're showing up after being reflective, practice what it is you want to provide feedback on. And in that practice, get clear and concise on how you want to present your feedback.
Yeah, I love that. That's such an important step in having that moment to get clear on what is it that I really need to say here? Like, what is it that I want to convey? Because sometimes we can wait to do that in the moment. And when there's pressure or we're really trying to choose our words carefully, it may get messy and muddy.
Absolutely. So, especially if you're a person who isn't really giving clear messaging, even if it's clear messaging, but it's landing really hard,
Mhm, mhm,
being reflective and going, okay, about myself,
mhm.
and then how do I want to show up? To
Yeah.
your point, calm, open,
Mhm,
receptive.
mhm, mhm.
And I also say, ask the person, what are you hearing back from me?
Yes. Mhm, mhm. So it sounds like we've stepped into step three, which
Oh,
is
yes.
really around um, being thoughtful about what you were wanting to say, perhaps even practicing what you want to say. Um, and to extend that a little bit, really staying present in that moment where if you are the deliverer of feedback, being able to really hear and understand and appreciate what the person is saying in response or how it's landing for them. Just staying present with it instead of maybe trying to close up the meeting quickly or to change the subject or to kind of shut down yourself. Or sometimes we then start going into a bunch of compliments for the person after delivering difficult feedback. And I would challenge you to just let your words land and choose them carefully and just sit with what's happening. What are your thoughts, Madeline? What would you suggest in that scenario?
Well, and what we're doing too in that moment is you're creating a collaboration with the
Mhm.
person you're giving feedback to. It's not feedback, it's done. I was uncomfortable, so I delivered it in this like awkward, maybe passive, and I hope you took it. Great. Instead, it's more to your point, I'm really present, I'm really clear on my messaging, and I'm going to let it land and then ask, what are you hearing?
Mhm, mhm,
Where do you feel that you can contribute or add to or maybe pivot based on the feedback I'm giving you,
mhm,
right? So now it becomes a collaboration with the person you're working with. And that I think is really how we help to evolve these conversations when we talk about having difficult or hard conversations when we're giving feedback.
mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and I try to visualize feedback as a bit of a dance between the two people involved in it. And how do you respond? How do you initiate? How do you respond and hear and reflect back and forth? It can make even difficult feedback a lot more palatable, I think.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate that we're talking about responding instead
Mhm.
of reacting.
Yeah.
And when we reflect and we get clear and we practice what we would like to say and being really mindful and present, that's where we can be really open and receptive to having that
Mhm.
dance.
Mhm. And I want to define just for a moment what being present looks like. Because I
Mm,
want to be very aware of like when we hit coach speak or we get into these things, right? Like where people may be like, what are you talking about? I'm sitting here, like I'm present.
yeah.
So to me, I'll share a little bit about what that means. And then I'd love to hear, Madeline, your interpretation. So to me, being present is really being engaged in what's happening in the moment. So I'm not checking my phone. I'm not emailing simultaneously. I'm not glancing at my computer or looking away. My attention is focused on what's happening in the moment. I'm here in my body, fully present. I'm not thinking about like what I have to get at the grocery store, right? I'm listening to the person, I'm speaking um, with intention, and I'm here in the scenario, in the situation. That's kind of how I define it. Madeline, I'm sure I forgot some stuff. What are your thoughts?
I think you hit it right there. And especially being intention. So I talk about being intentional with my words and how I show up, right? And at the end of the day, what can we control? We can only control ourselves. So in those moments of being present, to your point, am I physically present? Am I mentally present? And am I emotionally present, right?
Mhm,
So
mhm,
those are kinds of those three things of like, where am I? Because in these difficult conversations or in these feedback conversations that we're giving, sometimes we can feel elevated based on how maybe the other person is receiving it.
mhm, mhm,
So continuously checking in. And I also like to say when I'm being present, I take long pauses because I'm
mhm,
so present. I really want to be intentional with how I'm responding.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, that's a good cue to look for you to know yourself, right? Well, how do I know when I'm present? I think it's a good question to ask yourself if you're somebody who's in a lot of one-on-one meetings or even a lot of group meetings where you have to present something, you have to give feedback, you have to share something with other people, right? So much of our work is with other people, whether it's virtually or in person, but kind of checking yourself, calling yourself to the carpet, right? Am I present? How do I know if I am? What am I doing? What are my cues from when I may be like drifting off to
Oh,
somewhere
I
else?
think that's so excellent, Alyssa, with the cues. And I'm thinking about when we do react, what does that look like? You just kind of go into that automatic, like, like saying things. And I really like to implore my clients to take a step back and say things like, I don't know yet. I'm not sure on that one yet. Let me get back to you. These simple pauses help us to get more clear so that when we do really want to deliver, we're delivering it clear.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great to remember. And one last point I think it would be helpful to explore around this topic is the aspects of feedback that you can control versus the aspects that you can't control. So could you speak to that a little bit, Madeline?
Absolutely. So the feedback that you can control is what you're delivering, how you're presenting it, and the intention that's behind it. But what you can't control is how the person takes it, how they perceive it, or how they react or respond to it. That's something you truly cannot control.
100%. And it's simple in concept, but sometimes hard in practice.
Most definitely. Most definitely. Because we are wired to want to be in community and ensure like we're being pleasant, I guess, if you will, or being cordial in a work environment, and want to make sure like, okay, did I deliver this right? And can we still be, I don't know, coworkers in a good setting? And yet at the same time, we really can only control how we show up. So the more we show up present, intentional, and reflective, and open to that dance and that collaboration, then we really get to participate from a more elevated work environment, is how I would say that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so well said. And sometimes it just takes a simple reminder of that when you're going into what may be a difficult feedback conversation, that you can control yourself, how you share things, the words you say, your presence, the integrity with which you say them, and that's about it. And just kind of surrendering to that at some point.
Absolutely, absolutely. And going back to what we talked about in the feedback is the practice. The
Mhm.
more you practice this skill of showing up and being present and for yourself,
Mhm.
then the more, I'm going to say, easier that these conversations can become, because you're really being more present and intentional with yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, it becomes more familiar for sure.
Yes. Yeah. The unfamiliar becomes familiar.
Yeah. Well, we will leave you all on that note. So hopefully you found some things helpful, some nuggets to try out. And if there's anything else that you need from us, anything you need help with from TPI, please feel free to reach out to info@teamperformanceinstitute.com, and we'll be happy to help support you. So hope you all have a great day. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.